I think we may be online. Both platforms simultaneously. No, never mind. The witch may have died. Okay, it seems to have an aneurysm, no matter. We are going to wait for a bit for people to get in and for me to fix fucking Twitch. Oh well. Here's some more color. Woo. I know streaming, don't worry, I have this. I'm actually fairly nervous this time around. But yeah. Let's see. The transition has been made successfully. You should be able to perceive a blue thing and a cool logo on top of that. I guess I will do this in kind of a lore-ish way. So, welcome to the guild Yeytepy Authority. That's the GYA, not GAY. That's a different thing, not hosted by me necessarily. Here, in the several dozen minutes that are going to follow, we will go over a few Solaris-related questions, stretching our brain cells, toiling in pursuit of truth, or at least of as close as we can get to the truth. The truth is a fickle thing, you know, and I will show you why, and why this activity is necessary. I will also try to level the music so that it doesn't scream out over me. Right now, the chat should be appearing on the left side on the screen. This is combined from both YouTube and Twitch, and I will be looking at it at some points of the streams. I will let you know when that happens. For now, let's see what this is all about. You know, the world of Warframe is inconsistent at best, and insultingly self-contradicting at, well, like most of the time. The topic today is the Solaris, and the Solaris, as you may know, have a fairly peculiar build. Let me provide you with an example. Just a fair warning before I put this on. This is of course kind of a lore discussion stream, so there are going to be spoilers. If you do not want to be spoiled on these things, leave immediately. Now, there is going to be a Solaris appearing on screen in all their glory, so spoilers ahead. Now this is a Solaris. Their heads are stashed inside their torsos, so that they can survive the harsh cold weather of Venus. Their arms, however, if you can notice, their arms are exposed, uncovered, and if they go outside, they would normally die. It's as if they do not require any thermoregulation whatsoever. And while this may arguably not be a problem inside Fortuna, as in the picture you can see, there are Solaris who venture outside without any protection of their arms whatsoever. Here is an additional picture. I can provide one more. This is from the most recent update in the icy asteroids of Pluto Proxima. Solaris venture into, in this case I believe, near absolute zero temperatures with their arms fucking sleeveless. And the question is, how can that happen? Of course, if it was a normal person, the appendages would be rapidly dying, just necrotic and completely useless. However, the Solaris can still manipulate and operate them fairly well. So this is what we are going to be talking about. Why can they do that? When you see this sort of eye icon in the top right corner, I'm going to be looking at the chat and siphoning in various ideas, explanations, thoughts and suggestions for lore concerns. We are now discussing how can the Solaris survive outside with their hands or arms exposed. So give me some feedback, please. It could be synthetic or like heated, mechanically or something, says one interpreted chat member. I will get back to that. They are just built different, I do agree with that. Solaris are generally higher than the normal humanoid residents of the system. They are actually a little bit higher than even the normal crewmen. Fake arm, that looks real. They get cold damage resistance mods on... okay, of course. They have prosthetic bodies, so maybe weird chemical blood. synthetic cloned parts, very well. They no longer have pain receptors on their arms. Well, I mean, that's fair, but pain is not exactly the problem. It's being able to operate the arms. You still need blood pumping through them in order to move them around. So, that is a problem. Biomechanics, yeah, okay. One important notice before we progress. I have accidentally sort of enabled super chats on the other side channel voice name pending for testing. I didn't know originally what it was, and someone just donated that like 10 euro, which is a lot. And like, if you have a lot of money that you don't know what to do with from like a stimulus check or something, and you wanted to throw it at the stream for whatever reason, that's cool. But otherwise, don't do it, and know that I will not really be minding super chats at all. That is not the purpose of this stream. This is the last time in the stream I am actually referring to super chats. So please, do not be upset if I overlook that kind of thing. Back on the topic of arms. Terminator arms, not real skin. Pure antifreeze for blood. Digital Extremes is just drunk, that I would go with that, but we seem to have a lot of people voting for kind of fake mechanical arms, biomechanical. Now, you see, that is kind of a problem, because this is something a lot of people originally contested, that their arms are not actually real, and there is some evidence to support that. If you look at, for example, Thursby, whom has had his body parts repossessed, there is a kind of arm port sticking out of his torso, which would imply that the arms are in fact mechanical prostheses. However, there is also a lot of contradicting evidence, like, why would the arms have different skin tones that in fact match to the user's skin color? I do not know how this would be sensible for indentured workers. On the other hand, this seems to be the only reasonable explanation we have. But the problem with Warframe lore is that no matter how sophisticated your solution, no matter how logical your explanation, it does not matter. Because the Solaris, when they are thrusting enough, will expose their very faces to extremely cold temperatures just to say hi. And I don't think we can argue that the faces are biomechanical or prosthetic replacements. The problem we are facing is that Warframe lore is inconsistent and doesn't make much sense. There is not much logic or reason to be sought, and so we need to figure things ourselves. That is why we are here. We are not going to be trying to figure out what is the most sensible option. We are going to decide what is the most popular one. The truth and reality, especially in recent years, have gone wider apart, and our truth should be the most widely accepted. That is why we are going to be voting on these things. When you see this other cool icon, very high-tech stream by the way, there is a vote going on. Not yet, I'm going to put that in the chat and you will be able to pick different options, but we will figure out what people like the most. And what people like the most, I will sort of put into a summarized Solaris lore video after this stream. So that is the deal here. Now, pardon me, I will remove the eye icon. I'm going to be tending to the poll, which might be difficult because, as it turns out, my preferred kind of polling software of choice, straw poll, does not work anymore. So I had to go with something else and we will see if that works. But the first question is, how are Solaris arms able to survive? I am bad at typing, by the way. Survive exposure to extremely cold temperatures. One of the most, of course, options that we have seen in the chat are prosthetics. Some other things that are maybe more reasonable given the appearance of the arms, because why would you really make like a fleshy prosthetic? Normal Solaris, I think I also have a picture of this. Some Solaris also have actual prosthetics that are in fact replacements for the arms, or seem to be, which would make more sense. And if that is the case, there is no real reason to make prosthetics appear as flesh. But I'm going to put that in regardless. This is a democratic thing. Right, there's one of the things, I am not sure if that has been mentioned in the chat, but previously, when I gathered ideas for this maybe 6 months ago, when Deadlock Protocol released, some people suggested maybe it's like shields, like Warframes and Corpus personals have. Maybe the shields in fact also are sort of heat shields, so that may be an option. I think while that is kind of unsubstantiated, that is one of the more reasonable decisions to do about this thing. So, prosthetics, heat shields. I'm not going to put in D being drunk, because I think that is a given. One of the other things that was suggested in the original video was that maybe Venus isn't that cold, which seems to contradict the establishing Vox Solaris lore or the dialogue during the quest, but I'm going to put that in just for the sake of the wealth of options. Venus isn't that cold. That of course doesn't really work well with the most recent Railjack update, where they mine asteroids in pretty much the vacuum, but, well, as I said, it doesn't matter what makes sense or what is in fact true, but what people perceive as truth, and in that case, we should have options. Fortuna is just a fever dream, that's good, but we'll not include that unfortunately. Arousal raises body temperature, okay. Yeah, what if the weather ain't that cold? I was just mentioning. Radiation box. Right. I think that for the starter question, which isn't really a problem on its own, that's just a thing I picked up that I think will illustrate the problem of Warframe lore in general. This is not really a crucial problem, but it is sort of a testing thing for us to practice on before we get into the meat of things. So I think that 4 options will be good enough. And turns out that the server, or the service I used for this, has just crashed or died. It's just, yeah. It gives me a 400, so that is a slight problem. I did not in fact account for this option. Strawpoll is kind of dead. It updates very slowly, maybe after 5 minutes, so I went with this, and now this is also dead. So, good job stream, we have killed a website. While that doesn't feel really well, it's quite an achievement, but it leaves the problem. We don't have a way to war with. I think we will just have to use Strawpoll and just wait for the results as they come in. Strawpoll is kind of moody these days. It doesn't update immediately in real time, but I think that's the best option we can do, and frankly, I don't want to delay this for a long time, so let's go. Why do Solaris not lose their arms due to cold weather? As you can see, the poll is up, and you may have voted, which I believe, but unfortunately Strawpoll doesn't update at a reasonable period of time, so that is unfortunate. We will have to wait for a bit, and after that we are going to move on to the next question. I will also try to pronounce words more clearly, articulate more articulately, but I cannot make any promises there. Yes. I'm going to put up the Strawpoll link once again in the chat. You can vote now, but unfortunately the results are not going to come in a while. I suppose I will keep that up and update you on the results of the previous votes as we go through the next questions. I suppose that would be the reasonable thing to do, and we are going to do just that. let's get into the Solaris. Not literally, that would be bad. The first problem is the Solaris. Let us start at the start, in the past. Names are old, and they may lose meaning over time, but they still hold history, significance. So why are the Solaris called the Solaris? Sol is an old name for the sun, the home star we inhabit. So why would a band of indentured workers under the surface of Venus name themselves after the sun? Most likely they didn't, it is probably a name older than their depth to Nefanio, but what were they before? They do not seem to have any kind of significance, any kind of symbolism, any kind of worship or mention of the sun itself. This is the sun. This is the Solaris logo, or emblem, I suppose. The Vox Solaris emblem does have something resembling a sun, maybe, but that is purely speculative. They do not mention the sun, they do not worship it, they do not have any values reflecting the sun, they do not siphon any kind of energy or power from the sun. So why the Solaris? If you're putting up some hypotheses, please wait, I'm not seeing the chat just yet. This is just a spooky intro. Now, these are some ideas from the past, from the suggestions, contributions I got to the last video. Some people thought that Solaris were the solar farmers that inhabited great space stations and ships dedicated to energy generation with vast solar arrays stretching for kilometers. Some think they are older than that, having hand in building the solar rails for the Orokin, assuming their unique augmentation would help in zero-gravity exoatmospheric environments. Some people speculate they used to inhabit Orokin derelicts close to the sun, beyond the Mercury safe zone, which may also explain their affinity for manipulating Orokin technology and the Orokin terraforming towers on Venus. Some see the sun as purely symbolic of their supposed Solaris struggle, the will to rise and shine. But yes. Do you have any other input, any other thoughts why they may be called the Solaris? I am on to watching the chat now. Vox Solaris roughly translates to voice of the sun. While that is true, I do not think it is supposed to reference the sun as the sun, but rather the Solaris as the faction. Vox Solaris is supposed to be symbolic to the voice of the oppressed or supposedly oppressed people who want better working conditions. I do not think that is connected to the sun. Sun harvesters, that is one of the theories. They might be the original Venusians after the first attempts by the Orokin at terraforming it. While that is a plausible theory, that does not explain their name. Venus is Venus. No reason for Venusians to be called the Solaris. Some people think that the Solaris might call themselves the Solaris because they are from the solar system, but there is no reason for that either, because everyone at present is from the solar system. There have been, in fact, no other entities other than the Sentients who participate in a really short war, ever in the Origin system, that were somewhere from the outside. Everyone, the Corpus, the Grineer, whatever Orokin may be still alive, everybody at the Relays Syndicates, the Solaris, they are all technically Solaris, as in originating in the solar system. So that doesn't have much of a merit. The solar reflector over the valleys, this is connected to the Orb Mothers, and that may have some connection to them, but this is fairly unclear. Yudico was high when making it, that seems to be our go-to excuse. It just sounds cool and they need to raise morale. They were originally Team Sun in Lunaro, I like that! It hails from real esports gaming. Very well. I'm going to get back to the chat in a while, but I'm just going to check if the poll works. And as it turns out, no. So we have killed one polling site, and the other one does not work. So please give me a moment, I will need to boot up Google Forms. As primitive as means of getting information this is, I don't think we have any other options. Oh, it did now. It did now leap in. The results from the previous polling are in, but we are still going to use Google Forms for the next one. Because this is very slow. It seems like the general chat consensus... Okay. I do not think that it in fact works. It is highly statistically unlikely that nobody would vote for shields functioning as heat shields as well. I think it is completely broken. But going by this partially broken result, it seems like the consensus seems to be synthetic skin or augmented metabolism, which I suppose is fair and makes sense. There is an interesting thing. Wait, no! Oh no! There was an interesting post, but unfortunately Restream Chat eradicated it because there was too many new messages. Hold on, I will try to find it. I think it is lost. Can I Control F? Yes, there we go. Somebody says, the Spanish version of Fortuna calls the Solaris the original travelers of the Solaris ship, so they could come from a ship called the Solaris. That is highly interesting, and I have no idea how is that not mentioned in the English version. It may just be a person making shit up, but if that is the case, that may be a big thing, and it is a good explanation in fact. I'm going to put that in. There we go. I'm now going to put in the poll image, logo kind of thing, and I'm going to put it in the chat. The first mention of the poll has been sent out, and you should be able to find it in your chats. Oh no! The music volume levels went crazy. Sorry about that. But yeah, very indicative of the voting in progress. This is a serious issue, and responses are coming in. I may have gotten ahead of myself, but I think this may work. Straw poll is kind of dead, but this may be working very well. This seems like a kind of biased result. It seems like most of the votes are for they come from an ancient spaceship called Solaris. Other popular theories are builders of the solar rails and... No, wait. What? Oh, it doesn't show. Okay, this looks awful. But the last bar with 23 votes is for the solar terraformer on Venus. Let me see if I can update it, because it doesn't update automatically. There we go, we have an updated poll here. Still, the spaceship called Solaris seems to have the most votes. Possibly because it maybe, I honestly do not know. We haven't checked if this is in fact in the Spanish version of the game, but it seems like they may be coming from a ship called the Solaris in the game as well. At least in some localizations. So, that's fine. What about Garuda? I do not believe that Garuda is related to the Solaris. It's just a frame that got stuck on Venus after Orokin died. I think we can leave this matter solved-ish, kind of. It seems like we have agreed that the Solaris may have come from a ship called Solaris. Sometimes the simple solutions are the most meaningful. Ah well. Let us move on then. It would be good to switch the music, but we are going to be stuck with this annoying buzzing for a while. That is what constitutes popular music in the Solaris circles. The second problem we are going to be looking at, hold on, nearly at the half of the stream. We are halfway there, kind of. The second thing is going to be Solaris population. Not like reproduction, just population. Not what they are like, rather where they are like. They are best known for their Tenno-aided uprising in Fortuna on Venus, but how well does this represent the Solaris? What are they exactly? What have they passed? What can we see in Fortuna? Maybe the last remainder of their culture, or maybe just a small fraction completely different from the main population, located somewhere else. There are of course Solaris that are not in debt to Nephanio, some in Fortuna, some claim to work as independent contractors driving tractors. Very funny play on words. But others are also rail agents, just sort of... well, rail agent is kind of a polite word for an outlaw, a smuggler, using the solar rails illegally. Still, these aside, it is unknown whether the Solaris stationed in Fortuna, working their depths, are in fact the bulk of the Solaris population, or if they are just a small part of a bigger group that were indebted to Nephanio. Accounts of this are divided, and people don't really have much things to substantiate this with. There are of course Solaris in relays in other colonies like Cetus, but we do not have a glimpse of what the Solaris may be outside of their Corpus symbiosis, I suppose. So the question here is, do you think there are any significant Solaris settlements and groups outside of Fortuna? If not, any idea of what may have happened to them? Surely, not all Solaris could have been taken by Nephanio, like... What were the Solaris before getting into Fortuna? It is somewhat related to the origin of their name, but maybe we can kind of puzzle our way through this. I'm now going to turn on the spooky eye icon, there we go, and read the chat for a bit. The main population is divided among decks, and there are multiple colonies system-wide. The Solaris are the only problematic ones. Now, this is an important thing to note. What you see in Fortuna is only one deck of the Fortuna colony. There are more decks, like Deck 12, which was infamously destroyed, and the residents of these decks are not exclusively Solaris. In fact, the area you can access in Fortuna is not populated exclusively by Solaris either. There are people who are not, or who do not identify and are not identified as Solaris people, even though they appear similarly, they boast similar augments. Enslaved by the Corpus at large. Fortuna can be just one of many colonies of Venus. Well, that maybe, but nothing seems to hint at that. The current kind of cold area of Venus seems to be the only of that kind, as far as we know, or is at least implied to be the only one of that kind. Others' area of Venus will be strongly reminiscent of what is Venus today, meaning extremely fucking hot and probably uninhabitable. Pre-Orokin colonists, I suppose that would work with our spaceship idea. A Solaris worker in Fortuna supposedly mentioned the Oxiums can be pulled on Eris. That doesn't however mean much for locating or identifying the Solaris population. As I said, the Solaris are present in relays and other colonies, but this may very well be just Solaris freed from Fortuna. It doesn't necessarily mean there are other Solaris settlements. Yes, they are everywhere in the new events, again. This doesn't mean that there is some kind of an official Solaris settlement outside of Fortuna, but it is entirely possible there is one, we just have no information on it. The ice on Venus is kind of a problem. I believe the current open world is covered by ice because the previous tileset used for Venus was the Corpus outpost, which was basically a frozen planet. But According to the current law, there are not supposed to be any other areas like that on Venus. So it is possible that these Corpus outposts you can see in regular missions are located in Orb valleys, but according to the most recent retcons, there is not supposed to be a different area like this being terraformed outside of what Nephanio controls. Solaris aren't humans, they are robots imitating humans. Sorry. There are Solaris outside Fortuna. When you first join Fortuna, it says Solaris Intermittent Depth Colony. So there are other colonies outside it, right? That doesn't necessarily mean what you interpret by it. It can just mean that the colony is Solaris based, which seems to be the case. But if there are other Solaris indentured colonies, we know nothing of them. Very well, I think I see that we will not really gather much thought on this prospect, so we are just going to vote whether we think there are other settlements outside of Fortuna or not. There are of course Solaris mercenaries and rail agents and people like Little Duck, but that is not representative of the population at large. I am asking if there is some sort of a bigger organized body of the Solaris elsewhere other than Venus. But I will be sending out the form momentarily. It should be in the chat. Oh no, wait, I will shorten the link first, so it is not so intimidating. It should be in the chat right now. It didn't send to Twitch for some reason, hold on. And there it is. According to the most recent results, or at least at the time of speaking, most people seem to favor the option that there are other colonies or settlements, independent of the Corpus perhaps. Which I don't want to say that is a shame, because I don't want to appear biased towards the Solaris, but that is a shame. The least voted option seems to be Solaris live aboard migrating fleets, which is based on the idea that maybe sort of solar farmers on stations and spaceships gathering solar energy, but doesn't seem to be particularly popular with the chat right now. I'm going to refresh the page and see if anything has changed, and not much has. Some of the lower voted options have gotten more votes, like the recently mentioned migrant fleets option, but there are other colonies and settlements just grew in power, so I suppose you've got our answer there. Perhaps there are other places where Solaris live in the system, and they are just not bothered by the Corpus, so the Tenno do not need to intervene. Very well. There is really no evidence for the other fleets theory, the others are more logical. Well, that is why this stream exists. There is really no evidence for any of these options, and we just kind of need to go off what people feel like. Which seems to be the other colony's sentiment. Which may be a little bit hopeful, but it looks like that is what people are voting for. So there we are. There seem to be other colonies in other people's minds. Now, let's see the third and the most, well, the last big part of the stream, which is going to be, of course, the financial viability. This is something I have screamed about a lot in my previous videos, and I will have to concede and say that perhaps the Solaris makes sense in some way. Despite the Corpus automatization and machines being cheaper to operate even today, maybe Nephanio managed to squeeze some profit out of them. I do have to emphasize, I have some pictures for this, that the Corpus traditionally use mainly proxies. This little, really peppy boy, look at that. Most Corpus guilds, I would assume, are based on their proxies and robotic workforce. It is severely implied in many of the lore entries present in the game. Oh, not this one, wait. Oops. as you can hopefully see as I put them on the screen very clumsily. Even originally, the Corpus used to be a very technological kind of conglomeration of corporations that prided themselves on their mechanical servants. They seldom used to communicate with others in person, but of course that seems to have changed, as Corpus ships are now filled with filthy crewmen splattering about. Now, however, we are talking about what exactly is the purpose for keeping Solaris for Nephanio, because no other guilds, at least until recently, seem to have use for them. In the most recent Railjack update, apparently, there are Solaris workers operating in the Pluto region, but that may be because not Alad, I'm terribly sorry, Fraudback is fucking dead, presumably. So perhaps somebody else, or even Nephanio, took over the Pluto region in this great timeline. Still, we are talking, why does Nephanio want to keep the Solaris? With the Fortuna being nearly finished and the terraforming towers being mostly operational, surely he could afford to exterminate most of the pesky ones, and just keep a few with the know-how how to operate the Orokin tech, or just replace them with the more expensive Corpus personnel. Still, there have been a lot of opinions surrounding this topic, because that is kind of the main point I raised and screamed about. So, one of the ideas was that despite machines being cheaper to maintain and operate, Nephanio does make a profit having I completely lost the file. Oh well, never mind. But a lot of people raised the idea that the Solaris are still profitable, even though they are kind of rebellious. Because they are technically not really workers and they need to pay their debts to Nephanio. They are maybe not really being that much of a drain on finances, despite their shenanigans and bombings and shit like that. There's also other ideas, like maybe Nephanio uses them for organ farming, which seems to be highly profitable. Especially if you consider that the Solaris have their stomachs or torsos kind of dug out so that it can fit their heads. Perhaps their internal organs could be sold on the market to more wealthy, well-off people. There is also an idea that perhaps, for some reason, and this is getting into a lot of speculation, maybe Nephanio does in fact believe his religious bullshit, to put it mildly. Now, traditionally, the Corpus do not worship a single entity or a deity, like the god of profit or something like that, but Nephanio has positioned himself to be a prophet, a prophet of profit and the void, which he seems to make offerings to, at least in pretense. But perhaps he does in fact believe in the power of the void and needs followers, worshippers, in order to maintain some good standing with it. Perhaps it is just him trying to establish a big megachurch, and for that he of course needs followers, and Solaris are cheap and not exactly intellectually gifted, so it is a ripe religious following, I suppose. There's some other ideas that I had, but I unfortunately lost the file thanks to my great streaming skills. There were some people who mentioned that this may be purely like a flex, Nephanio being egoistical and wanting to oppress other people because he is a capitalist, but I think these were just Perrin sequence troll accounts, to be honest. So I'm just going to be looking for other explanations in the chat now. I'm sorry about losing these ideas. He can charge more for products by saying it's handcrafted goods. Very nice, that is a nice touch. That sounds like something the Corpus would do. Organ transplants must be an extremely profitable business in a war-ridden solar system like the Origin system. I suppose. Then again, it's not that a lot of people who would be impacted by the war could afford the transplants. The idea is that the organs would go mostly to wealthy corpus, which are people who do not really participate in the fighting. Most people who participate in the fighting are indebted themselves, they are just basic crewmen, or people from other factions like the Grineer or Ostrons, and they definitely cannot afford something like this. Also, I disapprove of the organ farm idea, since the Corpus could steal Grineer technology for that. I suppose, but it is worth it to know that the Grineer technology is highly fucking broken. As you can probably tell by their visual appearance, Grineer clones are not exactly perfect. They are perpetually decaying and need extensive cybernetic augmentations to even keep functioning and be alive. Their organs are not actually usable in transplanting. Cloning technology seems to be a really good thing, but doesn't seem like any of the factions in the Warframe lore has it down. The Orokin had this knowledge at some point, but after they have been kind of deadened, the Grineer inherited this kind of science, and since then it deteriorated greatly. It is uncertain if the Corpus make any use of cloning technologies, but there is really nothing to suggest that they do. Corpus aren't focused on getting the job done, they are a corporation. Money on paper is almost as valuable as actual money, a financial bubble then. I would argue that money on paper is as valuable as money, because I do not think there is any other physical means of currency in Warframe other than platinum, and maybe some primitive like Ostron mating racks and pottery, but credits are purely abstract, I suppose. There is really nothing to trade physically in place of credits. Proxies do only what they are built for, right? You can get a person to do a lot of things. I suppose that is kind of a split in this area, because while proxies do only what they are built for, there can be proxies built for a lot of different things, and there are, according to the lore, great autonomous factories that operate with next to no personnel, just with proxies and robotics maintaining the output. On the other hand, being able to do creative problem solving is not exactly a bonus in some cases, as can be seen in Solaris, but I suppose the main advantage of having Solaris around is that they can provide the technological know-how of how to fix the Orokin terraforming stuff, which of course the proxies would not be able to do. Solaris burgers! Okay, I'm a fan of that. Corpus sex bullets, okay. We have gone over this on the testing stream for this, over Solaris sexual positions, and I do not want to relive that event. It has been a harrowing experience for everyone involved, I believe. You need personnel to build the factories. Well, no, not necessarily. Factories can be built by robots as well. But, like, in the start, I suppose. The Corpus are, however, far past that point. The bulk of Solaris are engineers and technicians, as the ticker cases show. That is in fact true if you check the ticker kind of bond release kind of system. There are occupations of the Solaris you can purchase, and most of them seem to have technical focus. Some of them don't, but most of them seem to be focused on fixing things, maintenance, sometimes even research. So that is a point in favor of that. Do they have cocks? Let's not answer that. I don't know. Oh no, the chat is starting to get horny, I agree. This is not good. We will need to abort really soon. Proxies can't design, only replicate. Well, that is true, but I wouldn't say that the Solaris get much opportunities to design either. They seem to be mainly supposed to do some pre-existing tasks, like maintaining the terraforming equipment, building Fortuna. They don't do a whole lot of designing, I would say. Okay. Distrust. Okay, someone mentioned that the proxies could be hacked and maybe Solaris could be more dependable if you scare them enough with terror, but I will put that into the distrust of proxies option. Let's understand that choice that way. Nefanio is just an asshole. I would put that as an option, but I think that is a given no matter what we vote for. Erotic services. Because of the insistence of some chat members. But I hope... Of course, now when I say it, it's going to be the most voted option. Who am I kidding? But please, to try to exercise some restraint. This is going to, of course, result in a sort of funny lore video. And while that would be funny, I don't think that YouTube would allow that kind of a thing. I will not make this a multiple choice kind of thing, so that not everyone votes for what they deem reasonable, and also erotic services. No, of course, okay, yeah. To be honest, this is my own fault. This was to be kind of expected, and I will probably disregard that option, mainly. Selective result interpretation, right? But, right. I will take the result into account, but I will probably mainly look at the second most voted result, since the results are as following. Where's the poll? There's the poll. Uno, there's the poll icon, that's now a thing. I will send the link once again, but it seems like the chat has made up its mind, as unfortunate as that may be. Most people, I will refresh the page before doing that. Most people seem to be in favor of erotic services, which begs the question, how the fuck does that happen? The second most voted for part is organ harvesting or farming, which I agree would be a rather reasonable course of action. Then we have their debt is profitable, which a lot of people seem to agree previously on as well, which, well, I guess I cannot argue against because I would get beaten up. Ah boy, well, I will put the link to the poll once again, but I do not think we are overturning this result. Also, my music has just died, so that is good. I'm just going to put that back. But yeah, I think we have really learned something today, haven't we? We have learned not to make these kinds of polls with erotic services in them. That's what we have learned. Going to refresh it really quick. There we go. And oh no, I disabled it. And erotic services grow ever more powerful. Oh well. I think that is mostly it, honestly. I do not dare do much else beyond this, because, well, erotic services seem to rule today. So yeah, I think that is it. I had some more kind of expanded lore stuff, but I underestimated how verbose and how bad at pronouncing things I would be, and also at how inflexible the polling would be. So I think we are going to end it at this point. I may make something else, not necessarily in a stream format, because I really don't think I'm good at this. But I will probably give people some opportunity to voice their mind surrounding the Solaris lore in a different form, maybe a Discord, maybe something else. This has been up like 6 months ago, again after Deadlock Protocol went up, but that has been a long time, and I think some people may have some other ideas, some new people may have some new ideas, so I will let that happen at some form. I will let you know how. So I think we are just going to end it here. There is no point to continue this disaster. But thank you for your contributions. I of course hadn't had the chance to really read through all of the chat. It went by very fast, but I will go back to it and see if I can find something else that may have been interesting and good and that I may have skipped that could be included in the resulting video. That, I believe, may be it. I'm going to play the notorious theme song of Fortuna in the end. You can maybe all sing along and lived together, if you will. There we go. There it is. And thank you for participating in this. If you enjoyed it, that's great. If you didn't, I'm terribly sorry.